Welcome to Mr. Screen. It was a dark and oppressive night in the multiverse. In one twisted timeline, Tony Stark, the man who had once been a symbol of hope, had become something far more terrifying, Dr. Doom Stark. Fusing Stark's genius with Victor Von Doom's ambition and magic, he created a cataclysmic event called Doomsday. Under his rule, he defeated the new Avengers and transformed the planet into an extension of his vision of absolute control. But in another timeline, a different Tony Stark, a survivor of his own ravaged reality, was determined to right the wrongs of his corrupted counterpart. He had transcended human limitations, donning the superior silver armor and advanced technology with abilities that defied space and time. The fall of the Avengers. The new Avengers were defeated. Sam Wilson, the new Captain America, could barely stand as he stared at the destroyed horizon. Thor, dirty and bloody, clutched his hammer with difficulty. Shang-Chi and Doctor Strange lay fallen, while Kamala Khan and Kate Bishop tried to help the survivors. Dr. Doom Stark, standing over the ruins of New York, watched everything coldly. His golden armor, adorned with mystical runes, pulsed with energy. "You don't understand," he said calmly, his voice echoing like thunder. "I'm not the villain of this story. I am the solution." Doctor Strange, with a last effort, conjured a protective shield around the heroes. "You don't understand, Stark. What you have created is destroying the timelines. This is not control, it is chaos." Doom just smiled. "Chaos is what you have brought to the world. I am merely rearranging the pieces." And with a gesture, he launched a beam of energy that destroyed Strange's shield, leaving the Avengers at the mercy of his will. Just when all seemed lost, a silver flash cut through the sky. The arrival of Silver Tony Stark. Tony Stark emerged from the chaos. His silver superior armor radiated an energy that seemed to transcend time and space. He landed with determination, looking at his distorted self. "It's strange seeing you and thinking that it could have been me. But I won't let it continue." Doom Stark tilted his head curiously. "So, you're the multiverse's answer?" A desperate shadow trying to stop the inevitable. Tony didn't answer. He knew there was no time for words. Activating his systems, he fired at Doom, beginning a battle that would shake the foundations of the multiverse. The fight of the two Tony Starks. The two Starks fought ferociously, their armor lighting up the sky. Doom used a combination of technology and magic, while Tony relied on the superiority of his engineering. But Doom had something Tony didn't: absolute knowledge of the weaknesses of the alternate versions of himself. "You can't beat me," Doom said, as he unleashed a wave of energy that nearly dismantled Tony's silver armor. "I'm you, but better." Tony activated a special ability of his armor, the Absolute Temporal Mode, which allowed him to slow down time and deliver a series of precise blows. Doom staggered, but quickly adjusted. Meanwhile, the new Avengers watched, slowly recovering. Sam Wilson looked at Thor. "We have to help. No matter how strong he is, Stark can't do this alone. A fragile alliance." When the new Avengers tried to join the battle, Doom easily stopped them, using his magic to trap them in energy bubbles. "I've already defeated you once. Do you really think you have a chance now?" At that moment, Tony used the distraction to attack Doom, but was repelled again. Doom glared at him, irritated. "You are persistent. Admirable, but useless." Tony activated a holographic transmission to the Avengers. "Listen up. The battle here is just beginning. Doom is using a temporal anchoring machine in the fortress core. If we don't destroy it, he will have absolute control over all timelines." Doctor Strange, still weak, listened attentively. Messaging the timelines is dangerous. Destroying the core could cause something even worse. Tony hesitated. He knew Strange was right, but there was no other option. Would you rather risk complete destruction or let Doom rule everything? The defeat and the revelation. Despite their combined efforts, Doom defeated the Avengers and Tony again. He left them on the brink of death, returning to his fortress to activate Doomsday. Meanwhile, Doctor Strange began to use his magic to search for a solution. It was then that he had a terrifying vision. The real danger was not Doom. He saw a larger entity forming in the timelines, fueled by the temporal manipulations of all of them. "This can't be happening," Strange murmured. Thor approached. "What did you see, wizard?" Doctor Strange answered in a heavy voice. "Something much worse." an entity created by our mistakes. We need more time. Tony, even though badly injured, stood up. Time? That's exactly what we don't have. Tony's sacrifice. With the Avengers incapacitated and Doom about to complete his plan, Tony made a final decision. He knew the only way to stop Doom was to sacrifice himself. Using the remaining energy of his armor, he invaded Doom's fortress, facing him one last time. "You'll never understand," Doom said, as he launched a final blast at Tony. Tony, smiling despite the pain, replied, "Maybe you don't need to understand. I just need to end this." He activated the self-destruct core of the superior silver armor, creating an explosion that disintegrated the fortress and seemingly destroyed Doom. A new threat. When the dust settled, the Avengers found only wreckage. Thor lifted Tony's silver helmet in silence. Sam Wilson placed a hand on his shoulder. "He saved us. But at what cost?" Doctor Strange looked toward the horizon, worried. His sacrifice was in vain if we don't deal with what's coming. Sam frowned. "What's coming?" Strange turned to them, his face grim. "What we have created with our actions. An entity that transcends all. We must prepare ourselves for the Beyonder." And so, as the multiverse reeled from the chaos, a new threat emerged, greater and more mysterious than anything they had ever faced. The silence after the explosion was suffocating. The wreckage of Doom, Stark's fortress, lay scattered for miles. A gray haze covered the horizon, like a funeral pall for Tony Stark, the man who had sacrificed everything. The remaining Avengers stood together, wounded and exhausted, surveying the devastated landscape. Thor held Tony's silver helmet, his eyes fixed on it with a mixture of respect and regret. "Iron Man died like a true warrior," he said, his deep voice echoing in the silence. Doctor Strange remained silent, his hands clasped behind his back. His mind was elsewhere, reliving the disturbing vision he had seen moments before the explosion. When he finally broke the silence, his voice was thick with concern. "The victory over Doom is not the end. In fact, it may have been the beginning of something much worse." Sam Wilson, leaning on his shield, raised his head with difficulty. "What did you see, Strange? Don't hide anything from us now." Doctor Strange turned to them, his face carrying an expression of deep gravity. "Doom's temporal manipulations, combined with our own mistakes, have triggered an anomaly in the fabric of reality. An entity has awakened. Something far greater and more powerful than Doom could ever dream of being." "Who or what is this entity?" asked Kamala Khan, her voice shaking. "The Beyonder," Strange replied, pausing to let the name hang heavy in the air. "An entity of absolute power, existing outside of time and space. He is no ordinary being. He is a force of existence itself. And he knows we are here." Before anyone could respond, a burst of energy flashed through the wreckage. The ground shook, and suddenly a figure emerged from the ashes. It was Tony Stark, still wearing the superior silver armor, though it was more worn and radiating a new, unsettling energy. Stark's rebirth. Thor stepped forward, hammer in hand, but hesitated when he saw the figure. "Stark, are you alive?" Tony smiled slightly, but his expression was darker than ever. "Alive is relative, Thor. The explosion changed me. The superior armor absorbed Doom's energy and something else. Now I am different. Stronger." Doctor Strange frowned, watching Tony carefully. "You've been touched by Doom's time core. Your energy isn't just technology now. It's mixed with something beyond that." "I know," Tony replied, "and that's why I came back. We can't waste any more time. If what you said about the Beyonder is true, Doom wasn't our biggest problem. He was just the introduction." Strange's explanation. Doctor Strange gestured, conjuring a mystical projection of multiple intertwined timelines. When Doom began manipulating the timelines, he forced the multiverse to react. His every action caused ripples that rippled through the fabric of reality. And we weren't innocent in this. Our own time travel, our mistakes, it all contributed to this. He pointed to a central line that pulsed with intense light. The Beyonder is a manifestation of the multiverse's backlash. He was created to assess and correct our failings. But his correction will not be merciful. He does not distinguish heroes from villains. To him, we are all guilty. "So what does he want?" Sam asked. "Justice," Strange replied. "His way. He will erase anything he considers a threat to the balance." Stark's strategy. Tony interrupted, his voice firm. Then we have to stop him before he decides that balance means destroying everything. You say it like it's easy, Kate Bishop retorted. We're talking about an entity that, from what I understand, is more powerful than anything we've ever faced. Which is why we need a plan, Tony said. He raised his arm, activating a hologram projected from his armor. My armor is enhanced by Doom's energy. If I can channel it correctly, perhaps we can create an opening to confront him. Dr. Strange shook his head. This is a huge risk. The energy you've absorbed is not stable. It could destroy us before we have a chance to use it. Since when have we done things without risks? Tony replied with a slight smile. The Beyonders' first appearance. As the group argued, the sky began to change. The clouds parted, revealing a blinding light that seemed to consume the horizon. A figure emerged, seemingly composed of pure energy. It was the Beyonder, his form floating like a mix of humanoid and cosmic abstraction. You have toyed with the fabric of existence, he declared, his voice reverberating in every direction. Now I have come to right your wrongs. Thor raised his hammer, advancing. You will not right anything. Not while I am here. Thor's blow was useless. The Beyonder stopped the attack with a simple gesture, leaving the god of thunder stunned. Your strength pales in comparison to my purpose, the Beyonder said, emotionless. Tony stepped forward, the superior armor glowing brightly. Then perhaps you wish to face someone who has also transcended human limitations. The Beyonder looked at Tony, intrigued. You carry a spark of what destroyed Doom. But that is not enough to stop me. The sacrifice and the promise. The battle began. Tony used every resource of the superior armor to keep the Beyonder occupied, while the other heroes tried to find a way to intervene. Even with their combined powers, the Avengers were completely outmatched. In a moment of desperation, Dr. Strange began to cast a complex spell. If we can't destroy him, he said, perhaps we can imprison him, at least long enough to find another solution. Tony realized what Strange was trying to do and decided to act as bait. Strange, do whatever it takes. I'll keep him occupied. The Beyonder noticed the attempt and began to advance to interrupt the spell. Tony, with a cry of defiance, unleashed the full energy of his armor in a final attack. The resulting explosion created an opening for Dr. Strange to complete the spell, temporarily trapping the Beyonder in a containment dimension. The new mission. When the dust settled, the group saw that Tony was alive, but his armor was completely deactivated. He looked at the others, exhausted. This was just the beginning. He'll escape eventually. We need to be ready. Dr. Strange agreed. And next time, he won't be so easily stopped. Thor placed his hand on Tony's shoulder. You proved that even in the shadows of defeat, there is still hope. Tony smiled slightly. Well, someone has to be the optimist, right? And so, while the threat of the Beyonder remained dormant, the heroes began to plan their next move, knowing that the real battle was yet to come. To be continued.
You're good. It'll pass. It happens with everyone.
Must have done something pretty serious.
What'd you do, man? What'd you do? What'd you do? Why'd they have you in there?
For killing the president.
Anyone who follows the events in one of the multiverses in comics knows very well the connection between Magneto and Doctor Doom. Many times they have wondered if the two were friends or if it was just a manipulation that Doctor Doom had, because he respects Magneto's powers. Well, pay close attention to this story that I created, which is insane. Without further ado, let's get straight to the point. The end of the dream. In a dark, cold, and silent room, Magneto sat, watching intently a holographic image of his old friend, Professor Charles Xavier. An old recording from years ago showed Xavier talking about a future of peace and unity between mutants and humans. Magneto shook his head with a slight bitter smile, remembering the many times he had discussed with Xavier about this utopia that seemed increasingly unattainable. Xavier was now trapped on a mission in space, out of reach, after a battle that devastated the X-Men. Many believed he had been captured or killed by unknown alien forces, but Magneto knew he was still alive, trapped somewhere beyond the cosmos. With the Professor out of the picture, Magneto had assumed control of the X-Men, a role he had always avoided but now seemed inevitable. But the difficulties went beyond leading the X-Men in a time of uncertainty. Kitty Pryde, one of the team's youngest and brightest members, was on the brink of death. The young mutant, who had the ability to walk through walls, was suffering from a mysterious mental illness. Her abilities were spiraling out of control, and worse, her mind was beginning to fragment. None of the team's brightest minds could find a cure. Bestia had tried every scientific and medical option possible, but Kitty's illness seemed to defy human comprehension. With the urgency growing and the X-Men team destabilized by Xavier's absence and Kitty's illness, Magneto made a desperate decision. He knew there was only one person on the planet with the intellect and the nerve to help Kitty, the newly reborn Tony Stark, now known as Dr. Doom. The unexpected alliance. Magneto had his reservations about Tony Stark. After his fusion with Victor Von Doom, Stark had become something more than human. He was now a combination of two of Earth's greatest geniuses, and also two of its most dangerous men. Stark's mind, once focused on technology and science, was now corrupted by Doom's destructive ambition. Magneto saw in Dr. Doom Stark a figure who represented everything he had once feared. Someone who could shape the destiny of humanity and mutant kind with the snap of his fingers. Still, Magneto was willing to take the risk. He knew that Stark could still be convinced, if treated with the right intelligence and persuasion. One dark night, Magneto traveled to Latveria, the new center of global power, now ruled by Dr. Doom Stark. The city glowed with a cold, metallic light, as if it were an extension of its ruler's cold, calculating mind. Magneto, flying through the sky with his magnetic field, landed directly on Doom's castle. He knew he was being watched, but his presence had not been impeded. In the Great Hall of Thrones, Dr. Doom Stark was waiting, clad in his armor that blended advanced technology and mysticism. His helmet hid most of his face, but Magneto knew that Stark was still there, trapped beneath Doom's mask. "Eric," Stark said, his voice heavy with metallic echo. "What brings you here?" "This is not a social call, Stark," Magneto replied bluntly. "I need your help." Stark inclined his head. "You need my help? Interesting. Explain yourself." Magneto hesitated for a moment, measuring his words. One of my X-Men, Kitty Pryde, is dying. Her mind is fragmenting, and even our best efforts have failed to find a cure. I know you have the means to save her." Stark crossed his arms. "Why would I help? I believe our last interaction was far from friendly." Magneto stepped forward, determined. "Because I can offer you something no one else can, the X-Men." Stark remained silent, considering the proposal. "You mean, if I save Kitty, the X-Men will join me?" "Yes," Magneto replied coldly. "If you help, they will follow my lead. And I will lead by your side, Stark. Together, we can take down the new Avengers and any other resistance that opposes us." The Dark-Cured Dr. Doom Stark smiled behind his mask. "You have always been pragmatic, Magneto." "Very well, I accept. But know that this alliance will come at a cost. The X-Men will be my instruments, and you will do whatever I say. Do you think you can live with that?" Magneto looked at Stark coldly. "If it means saving Kitty, I will do whatever it takes." Stark stepped closer and held out his hand. "Then we have a deal." Magneto shook his metal hand, feeling the weight of the future in his palms. In the days that followed, Magneto brought Kitty to Stark's fortress. Doom, with his blend of science and magic, began working on the young mutant. The procedures were painful, both physically and mentally, but Stark was determined to succeed. In the end, he succeeded. Stark managed to stabilize Kitty's mind using a combination of nanotechnology and arcane magic. However, there was a price. Kitty now carried an invisible mark of Doom within her, a connection he could use at will. Magneto knew this, but in order to save Kitty's life, he accepted the shadow that loomed over them. The first strike with Kitty healed and Stark honoring his bargain, the X-Men reorganized under Magneto's leadership. They were now united with Stark, and a new plan was underway: the destruction of the new Avengers, who had emerged after the fall of the old ones. The new Avengers, led by Sam Wilson as the new Captain America, were growing in strength and influence. Magneto knew that in order to ensure the safety of mutant kind, the the Avengers had to be destroyed. Stark provided the means. With his technological innovations and advanced weaponry, the X-Men were now more powerful than ever. Magneto, with his strategic mind, devised a plan to weaken the Avengers' morale and undermine their global authority. They struck first at the heart of the organization, Avengers Tower, now under new management. Magneto led the attack personally, while Stark manipulated global forces to distract Earth's mightiest heroes. The X-Men and Doom's forces advanced relentlessly, destroying everything in their path. Sam Wilson, Bucky Barnes, and the other new Avengers fought valiantly, but they were outmatched. Magneto, now at the height of his power and with the leadership of the X-Men, seemed unstoppable. But as always, there was a twist. The price of power. During a fierce battle in New York, Magneto felt the weight of the powers he had accumulated over the years. He had always been driven by a greater cause, protecting mutant kind. But now, alongside Stark, he began to question his own actions. As he crushed the Avengers' defenses, an inner voice began to emerge. Was this the future he wanted? A future where he and the X-Men would become mere tools of destruction for a man obsessed with absolute control. Doubt began to gnaw at Magneto, but before he could act, Stark made his move. He didn't just want to destroy the Avengers, he wanted complete dominion over Earth and all its heroes. Magneto realized he had made a terrible mistake in trusting Stark. And now Magneto, leader of the X-Men, was caught in a dilemma: betray Stark and oppose him, or continue his relentless march to destroy the Avengers and risk losing everything he had fought for. The final decision. With Kitty healed but scarred by Doom's influence, and the X-Men torn between loyalty to Magneto and concern for the fate of mutant kind, Magneto knew he was at a crossroads. What he did next would define the future of not only the X-Men, but the entire planet. He looked to Stark, his former ally and now potential enemy, and made his decision. The final battle was about to begin. The shadows of betrayal. In the midst of the battle, as the new Avengers fought desperately to protect Avengers Tower, Magneto stood, watching everything around him with eyes filled with uncertainty. The streets of New York shook with the sound of explosions and the impact of clashing powers. Chaos spread across the city as Stark's forces, now merged with the X-Men, advanced relentlessly. Sam Wilson, the new Captain America, soared through the sky, leading the resistance against the advancing X-Men. He was visibly tired, but he would not back down. At his side, Bucky Barnes fought tirelessly, blocking attacks and striking back with force. Magneto, seeing this, began to reflect on his choices. As much as he wanted to protect mutants, he knew he was on the verge of crossing a line he could never undo. He was blindly following Stark's ambitions, which had become something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. As Magneto pondered, Dr. Doom Stark monitored the battle from afar, smiling behind his metallic mask. He knew Magneto was beginning to doubt, but he did not care. Magneto had fulfilled his purpose to bring the X-Men to his side, and now Doom was ready for the next phase of his plan. In Stark's mind, there was still an internal struggle. What was left of Tony Stark was trapped, fighting against Doom's dominance. In moments of clarity, Stark saw himself in a mirror, trying to grasp any shred of his own consciousness. But Doom, ever present, controlled him like a puppet. "You betray me, Magneto," Stark's distorted voice rang out across the battlefield, amplified by a global communication system. "I thought I could trust your loyalty, but I see now that you have doubts." Magneto looked up, where a holographic projection of Stark appeared among the clouds. He could feel the coldness in the words of the man he had allied himself with. Kitty Pryde, now fully recovered, stood by his side, but she too began to question the morality of what they were doing. The other X-Men, including Storm and Colossus, watched, waiting for Magneto's next order. "I'm not your pawn, Stark," Magneto replied defiantly. "You promised to help mutant kind. You promised a new world. But all I see now is destruction and the insatiable hunger for power." Dr. Doom Stark laughed, a cold, mechanical laugh. "I kept my promise. I gave you the strength to end the Avengers. I offered you a future, but you chose to doubt me. Don't you understand, Magneto? Power does not belong to those who hesitate." Magneto felt anger rise within him. He knew he was on the verge of making a decision that would change everything. With a nod to Kitty and the other X-Men, he gave the silent order: "Stand down." The battlefield began to calm as the mutants began to retreat, leaving the new Avengers in momentary confusion. Sam Wilson and Bucky watched from afar, sensing something was changing, but unsure of what would come next. The counterattack as the X-Men retreated, Stark knew Magneto was about to rebel. But that didn't matter. In truth, he had planned this betrayal all along. To Stark, Magneto and the X-Men were just a temporary distraction. Doom's true goal lay far beyond. Through a clever maneuver, Stark activated a hidden device located within the X-Men's own base. A trap he had set up since the beginning of his alliance with Magneto. A burst of energy ripped through the X-Mansion, disabling all security systems and trapping the X-Men in an energy bubble. What's going on? Kitty screamed as the X-Men tried to escape the bubble, but there was no way out. Magneto, realizing what had happened, clenched his fists in anger. "It's a trap," he muttered. Stark planned this from the beginning. While the X-Men were trapped, Stark moved on to the next phase of his plan. He would manipulate time and space, altering reality itself to shape the universe according to his twisted vision. Using the power he had gained through his fusion with Doom and the advanced technology he inherited from Latveria, Stark began to tear apart the laws of physics. He opened a temporal portal, a tear in the very fabric of the multiverse. But something unexpected happened. The portal, instead of giving Stark complete control, began to consume everything around it. Time and space were in disarray, and a new threat was emerging: temporal anomalies. The X-Men Rebellion. Inside the energy bubble, Magneto looked at his companions. He knew they could not wait for rescue. The only option was to fight back. Using his magnetic powers, Magneto began to focus his strength on the field that imprisoned them. "If Stark thinks he can trap us, he is mistaken," he said with determination. With a burst of power, Magneto managed to weaken the bubble for a moment. Kitty, taking advantage of the opening, used her intangibility ability to pass through the barrier and shut down the containment systems from within. In one swift movement, the X-Men were free again. Now, Magneto spoke to his team. "We must stop Stark before he destroys the entire fabric of reality." The final battle. As Magneto and the X-Men advanced towards Stark's location, Sam Wilson and the new Avengers had regained control of the battlefield. They knew that Stark had to be stopped. As the forces met, a cataclysmic battle began. Magneto, Sam Wilson, Bucky Barnes, and the X-Men joined forces to stop Stark's plan of destruction. But Dr. Doom Stark, imbued with powers beyond comprehension, seemed unstoppable. However, Stark himself began to show signs of weakness. Inside his mind, the old Tony Stark still struggled, trying to regain control. He knew Doom was dominating him, but he could not allow the universe to be destroyed. At the decisive moment, Magneto used all his power to restrain Stark while Sam and Bucky attempted to deactivate the portal. Stark, in a brief moment of clarity, looked at Magneto and said, "In this, while I can still fight." With a final effort, Magneto and the X-Men managed to close the portal, and Stark was finally defeated. An uncertain future. With Stark out of the fight and reality restored, Magneto looked to the horizon. He knew that the future of mutants and humanity was yet to be decided. But for now, he had done what he thought was right. Professor X was still missing in space, and the X-Men needed a new path. Magneto, now more aware of the pitfalls of absolute power, knew he needed to lead with wisdom and caution. The war was not over, far from it. But the universe, at least for now, was saved. And Stark's legacy as Dr. Doom would be remembered as an eternal warning of what happens when power is taken to the extreme. So, what did you think of this story? If you've made it this far, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and see you in the next video. Goodbye.